In the United States, there was a time where truth in journalism was not celebrated, and tabloid-like articles ruled the day. This time period was called yellow journalism. This was started around the 1890s to fuel the competition for their bored readers and paper sales between the World and Journal, which was located in New York City. This competition soon spread to other cities and towns across the United States. The most popular topics of the time period was the Hatfield and McCoy feud, the Wild West stories, and believe it or not, the Killing Rock Massacre. A lot of myths about these stories comes from these articles written in the newspapers. We found this full-page article in The Sun, located in New York, concerning the Hatfield and McCoy feud, and we thought that it would be fun to pick it apart to separate the truth from fiction that is still being played out on the television and movie screens to this very day. In today's look at the article, we will begin with the introduction. This series will be each chapter first, as it is written in the newspaper. Then we will pick it apart to discover what really happened historically. Come along with us as we dive into the sensationalism surrounding the Hatfield and McCoy feud. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The reading of the article. Hold on! The article we are about to read contains a lot of mistruths about the Hatfield and McCoy feud. As we go through this chapter by chapter, we will address everything. Here we go. Remember to breathe as I had to. Quote, A Mountain Feud, a remarkable story of murder and outrage. The Hatfield and McCoy War. It began over 2 razorback hogs, renewed by the acts of a wayward girl. The guilty not brought to trial. On the contrary, Governor Buckner of Kentucky and Governor Wilson of West Virginia refused to give up acknowledged criminals. The few, who are awaiting trial, were kidnapped. 12 men flee from one. A wife's singular method of entrapping her husband's enemy. Mountain notions of morals, murders to come. A mountaineer, ornamental, and truthful motto. Logan Courthouse, Logan County, West Virginia, October 2nd. Today, the case of the state against Dave Stratton, John Norman, John B. Dodson, and Joseph Franklin Smith, all citizens of Pike County, Kentucky, charged with aiding and abetting in the murder of Bill Dempsey, a special deputy sheriff of this county, at the mouth of Grapevine Creek on Tug River in January last, will be called for trial. The murder of Dempsey was the 10th committed in what is known in this county as the Hatfield-McCoy War. The murders are all done in the most cowardly fashion. And in one case, an innocent woman was deliberately shot through the heart while begging with clasped hands and streaming eyes for her life. Besides those killed, 10 have been wounded, including 2 women, who have been crippled for life and whose lives have been shortened by their sufferings. One of those murdered was a lad of 13, who was compelled to see 2 older brothers shot to death before his very own sufferings were ended. In spite of the atrocity of the crimes committed, neither Governor Wilson of West Virginia nor Governor Buckner of Kentucky will issue a requisition for the transportation of even the acknowledged criminals from one state to the other. The people of the North have read short sketches of the incidents of the deadly feuds between Southern families. Here is the story in detail of such a feud from its beginning to the present time. Unquote. The truth about the Battle of Grapevine Creek. The article begins with a trial of 4 men who were being tried for the aiding and abetting in the murder of Bill Dempsey. This happened after the Battle of Grapevine Creek in 1888, but as we shall see, not all is as it seems written in the article. The beginning of the battle started when Deputy Sheriff bade Frank Phillips and his posse, that included Bud McCoy and one of Randall's sons, James Jim McCoy, were commissioned by the Kentucky State Governor, Simon Buckner, to begin tracking Anse Hatfield and his group of men across the border into West Virginia. On January 10th, Phillips arrested Cap Hatfield. Jim Vance was the first to die, as he was killed resisting arrest in a wooded area. There are several who claim that Vance was killed after the party, which included several McCoys, was ran down in the woods. Still others claim that Phillips took the law into his own hands and killed Vance himself. In several raids, Phillips was able to capture more conspirators, and 3 Hatfield supporters were killed in the attempts. On January 19, 1888, Deputy Sheriff Frank Phillips and his posse found Anse Hatfield and the other Hatfield men waiting upon them at Grapevine Creek. The largest gun battle of the feud began, which has made the feud legendary, but the Hatfields were eventually rounded up and arrested. Deputy Bill Dempsey, who was a Hatfield supporter and possibly the nephew of Jim Vance, was wounded and executed by Deputy Sheriff Frank Phillips on the scene after the Hatfields had surrendered. This battle claimed more than a dozen lives from both sides of the feud. So, we have a question. Why were Dave Stratton, John Norman, John B. Dodson, and Joseph Franklin Smith charged with the crimes if Deputy Sheriff Frank Phillips had committed the murder of Dempsey? The woman begging for her life. I have searched for the other 2 women who was killed and severely wounded by this feud. I could only find the direct death of a woman through the story of Alifair McCoy. There are references to a second woman, but we could not find her name unless everyone is referring to the death of Sarah McCoy. I also could not find the wounding of the other woman in question. This may change as the story progresses, but for now I have not been able to find the references of these 2 missing ladies. The only references we have concerning a woman crying and begging for the life of her children is that of Sarah McCoy in her own testimony before the court. In her own statement, she says the following, quote, I am the mother of Tolbert, Farmer, and Randolph McCoy. They are dead. Wall had a double-barrel shotgun laying across his lap. I was talking, praying, and crying for my boys. I heard Wall say that if Ellison Hatfield died, he would shoot the boys as full of holes as a sifter bottom. I fell on my knees and began praying, begging, and crying for my children. Unquote. The woman who was shot through the heart, according to the article, was Alifair McCoy. From everything I could find, Alifair suffered and was crippled by a bout of polio when she was a young child. When the McCoy cabin was set on fire on January 1st, 1888, she, along with several other McCoy children, were trying to put out the flames. When she went out to retrieve more water from the well, that is when she was shot. It is unclear from all of the stories we could find of her if she was shot in the heart or not. We also have not been able to find where she begged for her life. She was only 29 years old at the time of her death. Her mother, Sarah, was brutally beaten by Jim Vance and Johnson Hatfield when she tried to lend help to her dying daughter. According to the Hatfields and McCoys by Otis K. Rice, Sarah had begged to be allowed to tend her dying daughter, to which she was severely beaten in the head with a gun butt by Johnson Hatfield. Depending upon the source used, Sarah suffered a skull fracture or a crushed skull, her arm and hip were broken, and several ribs were also counted in the injuries. Sarah almost died of her injuries and would live out the rest of her life being disabled from the injuries she sustained that night. She would die in 1890, just 2 years after this event. The lad who was shot. We will delve deeper into the story of Calvin Cal McCoy when we reach Chapter 2 of this story. However, he indeed did meet his death when the McCoy cabin was burned to the ground. Evidently, when the house was set on fire to flush out the McCoys, Calvin grabbed his gun and ran out of the cabin to defend his family. He was shot immediately as he passed through the doorway. Calvin was 25 or 26 years old when he died. The States Refusal. Despite what the article has stated, there were arrest warrants that were issued for the crimes committed. In fact, Governor Buckner and Governor Wilson almost threw Kentucky and West Virginia into another civil war because of this feud. Kentucky Governor Simon B. Buckner sent his Adjutant General Sam Hill to Pike County to investigate how the situation could be calmed. West Virginia State Governor E. Willis Wilson demanded that the men be returned to the state of West Virginia as their capture was deemed illegal and not recognized by the state. Wilson sued the state of Kentucky for the illegal arrest and the 9 prisoners being held in Pike County and demanded reparations for the raids into the state of West Virginia. Wilson also sent troops to the border of West Virginia to prevent further raids from across Tug River. In response, Buckner sent troops to the Kentucky border to prevent further retaliatory raids by either the troops or the Hatfields against the McCoys. In only 20 years since the Civil War, once again the troops from 2 states were facing one another. In next week's video, we will begin with Chapter 1 that concerns the first murder, Bill Stanton, that occurred because of his testimony in a case involving a pig. Hang on to your bowler hats and bonnets as we walk through the myth, legend, and truth of the Hatfield and McCoy feud. Thank you. We at Kentucky, Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the myths and truths of the Hatfield and McCoy feud. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky, Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.